Hello, and welcome to part two of your journey as a coder. Today, we're going to be talking about variable assignments, and we'll do a quick functions recap because everything builds on top of another. After you have understood functions, input, logic, output, you have one gem that you can take with you to dive deeper into the coding world. So, just as a recap, it's inputs, the logic, and the output, right? And if we go back, we take a look at the structure or what's called the form or the syntax of how you do this in Python. It's the function name, your inputs like this, the logic, which is here, and the output, which is here. Now, for variables, we're going to zoom into this green square or this green rectangle, and we're going to dive deeper. All right, a variable can be thought of as a container or a label that holds a value. The left side of the assignment, which is an equal sign, this is called an assignment in coding. The left side is the variable. The right side is the value being assigned. So look at this fat diagram. It's actually a very simple concept. Variable on the left, assignment, which is the equal sign. This will always be true. And then value on the right side. So ABC equals 1, 2, 3. In this situation, I'll ask you, what's the variable of ABC equals 1, 2, 3? What's the variable? Well, it's ABC. What's the assignment? It's this equal sign. And what's the value? It's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if I print the variable ABC, what's the output? It's going to be 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, even this line goes back to this simple, basic underlying of input, logic, and output. What's my input? ABC. What's my logic? Is to print. And what's my output? It's 1, 2, 3. And how do I do this? By assigning a variable ABC and giving it a value 1, 2, 3. So I want you to slowly think about this. Okay, ABC equals 1, 2, 3. Variable on the left-hand side, which is what I'm printing, left-hand side. This equals 1, 2, 3. This ABC variable or container or label holds the value 1, 2, 3. Okay, here's another example. XYZ is my variable is equal to, which is assign XYZ to the string Bella. And if I want to print, which is my function, which is my logic, the input of XYZ, the output is going to be Bella. All right. This is the second gem that will give you the basics of understanding the logic part of a function. Again, most of this idea, variable assignment value, is pertaining into this part, this logic part. I should probably change the colors of this as a shade of green so it's like really, really clear. So I'm going to do that. Here, what are my inputs? 1, 2, 3. And what's my logic? What's in this? Add 3 numbers. This is my logic, right? And I'm adding them. So 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6, right? All it is just adding these 3 up. But just think about that. We write 2 plus 2 plus 2, right? We write 1 plus 2 plus 3, right? This is the same thing. However, look at how the different form that it's taking in computer science. Add 3 numbers, and we name it here, and then you just put the inputs in. And because we're returning the total, that's what's going to be outputted. This is going to be 6. This is going to be 9. So here's a couple of other examples. As you can see, just focus on this logic part. And at this point, you should understand the inputs and the outputs pretty clearly. So the focus should be on here, right? Like if I should, for example, a good way to test is saying like, okay, Bella, what's the inputs of multiply numbers? Num1, num2. Okay, what's the inputs of greet person? It's name. What's the input of calculate average? It's num1, num2, num3, right? What's the output of multiply numbers? Where it's just result. It's literally like anything that says return on the right-hand side, that's the output. This one, it's message. This one, it's average, right? But look at the complexities. Once you understand that, look at the complexity of the function. It's in here, you multiply the numbers instead of adding them. Here you have a string that gets added and then the input gets replaced, right? But these things here, all of this, you need to have a solid understanding of variable assignments here from the left-hand side. So take a look at this. I'm not going to go over it too much. Here is just like some key concepts. And in the conclusion is variable assignments are used 99% of the time in all coding logic. Like anytime you have code like this, there will always be some form of variable equals result. Go look at your code and try and see if you can find them, right? So anyways, it happens pretty frequently. And then having a solid understanding of this isn't to give you a better way of how to code or anything, but it allows you to read the code better, right? So if ChatGPT gives you something, it's really important not to be like copy paste, okay, it works, awesome, I'm awesome, because it's like anybody can do that, right? Like literally anybody like you can go and copy paste stuff in Telegram, in ChatGPT, and they can build a Telegram bot. Like we're there in the world. But not everybody can actually read the code and understand what is actually happening. So improving your literacy, what this does is it gives you a single way to like a single post or like a checkpoint for you to say like, oh, I don't understand this code, but I understand the concept of variables equals to value, and I can use that as a tool to dig deeper, right? So with the functions framework, you can understand at a practical level what a function does, what a code does, right? Like you don't need to know the intricacies of a Telegram bot to know that my input is basically, I don't know, it's just like me wanting to know the code better, right? My input is just like putting code in. The logic is, okay, ChatGPT helps me with that, right? And you're probably explaining it to them. But the output is like, okay, I want to see those messages come out, right? But like, what was a part in your logic that you missed? It was the permission scoping, right? So it's like everything in the functions framework, you can understand just high level concepts at a practical level without even looking at any code. And that's so key because it's so easy to get lost. So now the next step is, all right, I understand input, function, output, can apply that everywhere. Now with the variable framework, understanding this variable equals value, now you can go into the logic part, look at your code, and you can actually try and understand deeper of what's actually happening. So what's needed is obviously you need to invest more time understanding these two frameworks, variables and functions. And this will give you the two solid foundations to, I would say, like go to the next step and like understand more deeper, more fun, more heavier concepts like classes, typing, for loops, while loops, if statements, etc. But if you have these two solid foundations, you can always go to a more complicated concept and then come back to these two to be like, all right, let me think about this at a very fundamental level. And you won't get lost. Okay, so now I will give you an example of one here, right? So here, look how complicated this stuff is, right? Okay, that's fine. Let's go back to our framework. What is, and let me write it here. Functions, input, logic, output, variables. It is variables equals value, assigned value, right? I'm gonna show you how I use these two to understand this complicated concept of code. Functions. Okay, let me ask the question. What's my function name, right? Okay, it's called callback, right? What's my input? Well, my input is this request. Okay. What is it? I don't need to know. The fact that it says request and it's in these these parentheses, that's all I need to know. My input is a request. And if I take a look, I'll see, okay, it gets used here, it gets used here. It gives me a sort of starting point of at least being sort of like a detective or a spy to understand my code. All right, what's the logic? I mean, everything here is my logic, right? Okay. And that's it. I don't need to look deeper than that. It's just that anything inside here that's not a return statement is my logic. What's my output? Okay. All I have to do is search for return. Okay, so it says that if not code, return. So this is my output. It could be an error, or it could be here, another error, or it could say authorization successful, or it could return these three things. So there could be potentially three outputs, right? But using this basic framework, I can now understand that, okay, my input is a request, my logic is this block, and my outputs are three potential return statements, right? Still using that framework. Now I can dive a bit deeper. What did I say about what this variable framework is? It's a deeper dive to look into this logic, right? So all I need to do, at least for now, is see which one has an equal sign. So I know that, okay, I have code here's on the left-hand side, and what's the left-hand side? It's a variable, right? My value is this request, params.get, yada, yada. That's a bit complex, but it doesn't matter, right? It's just like, think of this as it's a value, like 1, 2, 3 or something, right? But the left-hand side, I know this is my variables. So then as you're reading this code, you can just say, okay, in the logic of my callback function, what are all of my variables? It's code, it's token URL. It's basically anything that has this equal sign. Okay, so it's code, it's token URL, it's payload, it's response, it's tokens, it's access token. And now I have at least a starting point of reading the logic. I don't need to understand like everything. But if I can just follow those rules of this variable equals value, knowing that code, token URL, payload, response tokens, etc., is my variables in my function is very powerful. And it took me sort of like 15, 20 seconds just by following this framework. Now, what's my value? Now, here is this the deeper step, right? Here I have this really complicated looking thing. There's this if, what is that? There's these brackets, right? There's this, which, okay, it's just a string, but it looks like a URL, right? This thing, this equal sign of this curly braces again. I don't know what that is. Here's another one. This type of stuff is just comes with experience, right? And this is not what we're focused on. I actually want you to maybe replace all of this. Think of it like this, like ABC, you know, DEF, GHI, just JKL, MNO, I don't know, XYZ, right? And from here, you can kind of see like, oh, look, I literally just change everything on the right-hand side to these strings, and I can get this. And truly, like, think about that. That's super powerful. You can do this. Look at all of GitHub, and you can use this framework, these two, and you can sort of read 60 to 70% of the code out there. So that's it. That's your lesson for today. And then let me know.